20 years ago, something truly terrible happened on the island of Bali in Indonesia. I might have remembered little of it if it were not for this photo. As the booming shockwaves of grief and loss reverberated around the world, in some ways this photo defined the event. I can still hardly believe that it was me. But it was. 20 years before that, I was on TV for the first time. And I was with my parents in Cornwall at a nuclear disarmament protest. I held up a little green sign that said, "I want to grow up, not blow up." Well, I did both. 20 years on, I was living on this swinging pendulum between my three worlds of Bali, Australia, Byron Bay, and Cornwall. I was halfway through an environmental science degree. I was relatively aimless. I didn't know what I was going to do with my life, but my parents did teach me to care about people, to care about our world. And they taught me to surf. Didn't have a lot of choice in the matter, actually. I was surfing with my boyfriend of the time, my first big love, Mark Gajardo, on Balian Beach. He was tall, dark and handsome, with this straight row of teeth in his easy smile. He was kooky, totally kooky, and he loved retro surf culture long before it was cool. He loved nothing more than surfing his retro Bob McTavish Noosa 66 longboard, while I always loved my short 6-foot shortboard. That day, on the 12th of October 2002, the air was warm. We watched these beautiful, clear waves rolling in from the horizon. I remember paddling into these waves, dropping down the face, this wall of white water to our left, wall of green to our right, and Mark was walking up and down his board, getting his toes over the nose and whooping with delight. I was riding my shortboard, throwing out salt spray. It felt as if everything was in harmony. It was Mark's last day. I wish we'd stayed there, and we nearly did. A safe hour up the coast from Kuta in the centre of Bali's nightlife. But we drove south. And I was dancing low on that crowded dance floor when a car bomb ripped through two nightclubs and turned a bustling street into a fiery wasteland. I escaped. Many didn't. Going back to the front of the club, I was looking for Mark. I found a young man lying on the ground and did what anybody would do. I picked him up, I hauled him over my shoulder, and we went to safety. And at that moment, a photographer snapped a picture of us, myself and Tom Singer. We were plunged into the spotlight. That photograph was shown in just about every news outlet in the world. But I was in shock, traumatised, grieving. I couldn't believe that the journalist wanted to talk to me. They said they called me lots of things. They called me heroic, brave, resilient. They wanted to nominate me for Australian of the Year, and I said, there's others who are far more deserving, and they wanted to give me a bravery medal, and I said, well, there were others who did so much more that night. But I couldn't believe that something like that could happen for no reason. So I decided to make my life worth something, anything, living, giving back, making a difference. So when they called me the Angel of Bali, I used that platform to campaign for peaceful solutions to the big challenges we faced as the Iraq War loomed. I went toe-to-toe with world leaders and tried to stop it, but I failed. I was raw, skinless. When the bombs started to go off, it felt personal. And every mother crying felt like Mark's mother. I could feel the shockwaves of every bomb reverberating through the lives of hundreds and thousands of people, so I had to escape. In Western Australia, where the big waves rumble across the reef, I found a place where no one knew me. I paddled out in my bikini at a little wave called North Point. I underestimated it. And as I took off on this wave, it pounded me into the reef. The waves smashed me down. I had two huge waves roll over the top of me. And as I came gasping to the surface, I vowed to learn how to hold my breath. I got fit. I got a bigger board. And over time, as my confidence grew, playing in those waves, healing, I watched the waves get bigger around me. I remember carving my turns and getting into control. It was exhilarating. I was alive, playing a game of dare with the universe. I was alone. Back in Byron Bay, there was this longboard without a rider, so I came back here. I tried to gather up the pieces of my life, and I took Mark's board out surfing. Big thing it was. Took it out at the pass, rode these long peeling waves, and as I rode this McTavish board, I fell in love with longboarding. I finished off my science degree, I went dancing, I drank a lot of tequila. I went travelling and I jumped back on the swinging pendulum between my three worlds and beyond. But sometime later, standing on a tall cliff in southwestern Europe, the wind blowing in my wild hair, I realised that the pursuit of solo adventure can take you only so far. So I went back to my Cornish village. I looked after my grandmother. I surfed the wild waves of the Atlantic, the cold waves. The British government was paying people to become a teacher, so I gave it a crack, and I loved it. So I began to connect. I began to connect with my students, with my community. I taught my students about climate and environment, and I began to give back. I felt useful. But sharing knowledge wasn't enough. I yearned to build knowledge. So I came back here again, back to Byron Bay, back to Southern Cross University, and I began to do what I still do now, research at that place where science, society, industry, and community, and our landscapes connect and intersect. But I was still single. This is 10 years on now from the Bali bombing. I was still grieving, but surely not. Surely after 10 years, I was over it. Past Mark's death. But I tell you now, I wasn't. So I decided to write a book about my experiences called Shockwaves, Finding Peace After the Bali Bomb. And it helped me to touch my grief and begin to move through my experiences. And when the proof copy of my book arrived, a very handsome young man called Kieran O'Reilly was at my house, and he was helping me with my research. And we actually had our first date that week. And it felt like the sun came out from behind a cloud and everything was warm and beautiful. We built a life together, drawn together by a love of surfing and our grandmothers. This month is the 20th anniversary of the bombing. And you sort of brace yourself again as this wave of emotions comes towards you again. But also there are new insights. I finally met the man who took the famous photo. His name is Roberto, he's Brazilian, and he told me that there's a photo before the photo. You can barely see me over in the right-hand side there. I'm reaching over to pick up Tom Singer. But for me, this photo gave me something, a realization and a peace with the event, because I realized that although there were many people there helping that night, when Roberto shot his camera into the darkness, it was my picture and Tom's that he picked up. And just maybe that helped other people to see some beauty in that black night. And I'm not just talking about my suede hot pants. Look, what really helped me to heal right there in that moment when the bomb was all around was seeing just people helping people. So perhaps it could help others to see goodness in that event as well. So did this event define me? Well, who is there in this room? And I'd love to know if there's anyone here who has not lived through some kind of shocking event of some sort. The researchers say it's about 2/3 of people, but of course, depending on how you define it, I would say it's a lot higher. I was one of the hundreds of first responders in the catastrophic floods that hit our region this year, and hundreds of communities have been traumatised and are forced to bounce back, adapt, like they're on some kind of trampoline or slingshot. I think definitions are really important, and I think especially in relation to how we respond to things. Resilience is about our capacity to bounce back and still maintain function. Sustainability is about trying to maintain things as they are. Restoration is about putting things back the way they were. But regeneration is about bringing new life, to recreate. So that's what I do now. I work with communities and farmers across Australia, helping them to adapt to what are very challenging times. I ran as a Teal community independent in the federal election, part of a national movement for community empowerment in politics. I coordinate one of the world's first courses in regenerative agriculture at Southern Cross University, and I'm a mum. So with the anniversary coming up and to mark this crazy year, I decided to get myself a new surfboard made. What board to ride? I mean, I can choose anything. Bob McTavish said, "Of course I'll shape you a board, Hanabeth. What do you want?" So I got a 9'1" square tail, something that I can walk the board, with any luck, get to the nose and carve turns off the tail. And for the inlay, a beautiful sarong I bought in Bali, maybe 9 years ago when I was pregnant with my first child. A beautiful Balinese print with these beautiful bright flowers to commemorate my surfing mum, who also passed this year. In my view, the regeneration in our lives is every bit as important as the regeneration across our landscapes, within our communities and our politics. I can't go back, but I can choose how I'm going to ride the waves of my future. Our lives, like our communities, like our planet, our soils, are never going to be the same as they once were, but we can regenerate. And that's what I'm doing. But regeneration is a continual, dynamic, living process. Like the shockwaves, it never stops. Thank you.